Welcome to SoulFood Poetry Night, everyone. We're very pleased to have you here. And as I usually say in person, you made a choice to be here instead of doing something else. So I honor that choice. And I'm very pleased that you could be with us tonight for our SoulFood Poetry Night. I think we're in our 16th year. Next month will be our anniversary month. I think it'll be the end of the 16th year next month. So we've been doing this monthly, except we missed a couple of months at the beginning of the pandemic a couple of years ago, and we've had a couple of snow day closures, but generally doing this monthly for 16 years now, so long tradition. And we're very pleased in our Zoom era to be able to cast the net wider, to have people from farther afield instead of just the local Seattle area. I'm Michael Dylan Welch, and I've been hosting SoulFood Poetry Night all this time. And I'm very pleased that we have Rick Lupert and Ellyn Maybe with us as our featured readers tonight. And before that gets started, I do want to mention that next month on July 21, that's our anniversary reading, our featured readers are Kristen Lindquist and Leslie Dower. So that's coming up on July 21. And more readers in the months beyond that. August 18 is Katarina Canyon and Uji Bay. So that's coming up as well. And to get us started, I thought I would read a poem by James Wright. So I will share the screen for that. This is a song called A Blessing by James Wright. Just off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, twilight bounds softly forth on the grass, and the eyes of those two Indian ponies darken with kindness. They have come gladly out of the willows to welcome my friend and me. His friend, by the way, is Robert Bly. We step over the barbed wire into the pasture, where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There's no loneliness like theirs at home once more. They begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slenderer one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She is black, white. Her mane falls wild on her forehead. The light breeze moves me to caress her long ear, that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly, I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. So that is James Wright. And now it gives me a pleasure to introduce the first of our two featured readers tonight. Ellyn Maybe is a United States Artist nominee from 2012. And is the author of numerous books, widely anthologized, and has toured internationally. She has a critically acclaimed album, Rodeo for the Sheepish, from Hen House Studios. And her latest poetry music project is called Ellyn Robbie. And I think we'll have a taste of that with a video later on. Their album, Skywriting with Glitter, has also received high praise. And I'll post her website into the chat. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Ellyn Maybe.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you. And thanks so much, Rick, for inviting me to feature with you. And Michael, it's wonderful to meet you. And, we were talking about Zoom, right in the beginning. And I have a poem for Zoom because we were talking, that's one of the very special things we've had happen. That's maybe this rarity of being able to communicate via this distance. So this is called Zooming Through the World. Gratitude to the events happening around the world on Zoom. Listening to readings, lectures, and concerts from all over the sphere is a wondrous thing. The logistics of turning on the computer and being in a library in Brooklyn, a museum in Portugal, a concert in Scandinavia. All is possible. Walking into Zoom is like a world encapsulated amidst this hum of time in an Askew Dali universe. Melting clocks, Van Gogh sky, stars lifting their ears to whisper at us, like a seashell understanding how the world has become tiny like a thimble and large as an ocean eternity. Simultaneously seeking events and connection with all the ancient and new solitude. Blending in a dance, learning new steps, twirling through the hemisphere, the future wearing invisible ink, unclear and profound. And I wrote a poem on, like, I guess January 7th, I wrote this poem, and Aaron Kerbel turned it into a stop motion animation. It's, if you're able to look that up somehow, that's a really, what he did with that is really cool. And this is Somewhere in the Sky. What if every moment you feel something happening? Someone scattered daisies and someone throwing ash. What if you feel the bones of history and the ache of the land? What if you wake up in your head as a map in a million different languages? What if you were able to eat musical notes for breakfast and symphonies for snacks? What if documentaries are written in your eyelids like rain? What if you listen to everything written with the crescendo of breath? What if everything blended technicolor wonder, but only for an hour? Would you wake up early or stay up all night in order to find it? What if your sky shimmered with glitter? What if your hemisphere drizzled with doom? A thesaurus of moments, human in nature. Would you live in the clouds or relish Earth's hue? Perhaps life is a multiple choice question, my friend. The answer's in the circle dance with no beginning or end. And here's a poem, hopefully that can be, I don't know, hopefully resonant. This is called Being an Artist. Being an artist means the recession will always be there and has always been here while you sit not writing screenplays, not taking meetings, just writing love letters to Van Gogh's beard, not wearing a watch, not caring who's on the cover of People magazine. Being an artist means you might sleep awfully late. You might choose totally different things as the 4 major food groups. Mm-hmm. Being an artist might mean you feel depressed and make others feel distressed when they are near you. Being an artist means you probably memorize the aisles at the 99-cent store. You probably have, you know, it's gone up to $12 now, service charge each month for low funds in your checking account. Being an artist means you don't feel you have the right to remain silent. Being an artist might make people think you're on drugs. Being an artist means people think your closet is full of turtlenecks and mood rings. People assume you play harmonica. People assume you know all the words to every song released in the 1960s. Being an artist means you do. Being an artist means serenity, intensity, sometimes simultaneously. Being an artist means you have the power of civil disobedience on the tip of your tongue. Being an artist means shrinking tie-dye t-shirts because you were thinking about a poem and didn't notice the washer was on hot water. Being an artist is an active verb, a noun, a consonant, an adjective in a world full of chaotic life sentences. Being an artist is not necessarily a choice. And let me see. Oh, here's a poem I wrote for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. RBG. There's a flurry of judicial collars lining the clouds. Every decision and every dissent stays in the air like musical breath. With your penchant for opera, you were a fermata of wisdom, holding on through the ravages and chaos, pioneer an epic full of verve and mind-shattering strength, wearing resistance and resilience on your soul, supreme being, superhero, legendary icon for good. You remain larger than life in our memories. Breathing your last breath on Rosh Hashanah is said to be the way of the righteous. You were notorious, thrilling, doing what you were put on earth to do. You leave behind stardust and legal briefs and push-ups and tenacity. You were the first in your class. You were one of a kind. You are remembered with respect. The opera glasses hang in the air, waiting for more and more and more to see how you became music. Through the sky, wisdom sings our hopes awake. Your legacy still lives on earth in every constellation that needs truth. Oh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you are so dearly missed. It is now up to us to put our collars on and walk into the future with the opera whispering in our ears like a ferocious future and a crescendo. It is now up to us to sing your memory home. Let me see here. Yes, right here. So I read this and then I will, I think, have the playing of Myth. But I appreciate people being here. It's so nice. I appreciate that so much. This is really cool. I'm looking forward to hearing Rick and everybody in the open ring as well. So this is called 2016, the year the 20th century finally died. The year so many musicians died and the year freedom seemed to be moving underground, caskets filled the air. We live in times of turmoil, clocks beating quicker and quicker. Middle age seems old, seniors seem timeless. There's a lethargy in the way people move. There's a liturgy on the tip of our tongues. There's something in the morning cereal. It looks like newsprint. There's something in the evening news. It seems like farce, as though this couldn't be real. This over-the-top peek into tragedy's eyelid. This shiver that lives in our psyche like snow. We ski into another winter. The world is on a ski lift. Cocoa is leaving its face around a cup. We stir and it's January. We stir and it's the 20th century. We stir and it looks like it's black and white newsreels. History tries to repeat itself as the people in power like sequels. People wear the hero mask, the death mask, the face and the heart. People make choices, the stores sell everything. One of the strongest songs from Rodgers and Hammerstein, You've Got to Be Carefully Taught. Prejudging is the name of the game so many households play. Play Rummikub instead, play solitaire. Don't be influenced by peers. 1 minute to midnight, but people don't know if the year will leave us dangling from some threshold. History said, look at me with your eyes of flame, burn my pain in your memory, walk into the libraries and kiss all the spines. The earth is spinning whether people stay on it or not. What if earth falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it? The last person on earth will carry a pencil. That is why earth has survived this long. So thank you. And I'll ask if it'd be possible to play Myth. And this is from when we, the Ellyn Robbie project, we played it, a video thing that was on YouTube called Live at Lunkett. So it's a piece called Myth from that. And thank you again for having me.
Myth. I wanted to feel the music of your shoulders, watch the tension of CD turn to 8-track. I read your nonfiction. If that's not a crush, what is? You live 20 years away from Richie Havens, turning up at a cafe. I watch the liner notes of your wrists like a fortune teller. Jerome Robin choreographs your neighborhood with a pale peony. I heard there's a tree in Washington Square Park dripping with handcuffs and a noose. Phil Oak sings of the cobwebs of contradiction. Did you ever wear sandals? Did you hold a megaphone? When did you start wearing cufflinks? When's the last time you played a folk song? When's the last time you kissed a girl who memorized Bob Dylan's bootleg releases? When's the last time you used groovy as a verb? When's the last time you hummed a Rodgers and Hart song? When's the last time you went to Kim's video store and rented hair? How many roads fork into most travel? The asphalt is pinstriped 1/4 of the time. I don't know what decade I'm in. I watch you watch the parade. I'm the one who whispered in your ear. The Army McCarthy hearings aren't available on DVD. I'm in the park feeding the pigeons bread and circuses. Come midnight, I watch Michelangelo leaning out of a helicopter. He has quite an eye for astronomy. Every night, Lord Buckley leaves Cafe Wa. Every night, Walt Whitman and Allen Ginsberg fly like Chagall above your window. One night, I tagged along with my flailing trampoline. I tried to visit you like Frank O'Hara's son. You drew the blind. You took away my yellow. Suddenly, a confetti of tangerines fell from the sky, labeled, handpicked by Icarus. I ate till I was sticky.
Thank you, Ellyn.
You're welcome.
A question for you.
Mhm.
Could you tell us about your path to poetry?
Let's see. Well, I was I would write a little bit like stories a little bit when I was really little. And when I first started writing poetry, I was super shy. And so I would go to readings and I would like, at first I would like say, maybe I'll read. And I wasn't sure I'd ever read, but and it was sort of like this flexibility that way. And I ended up reading and, I mean, so I don't know, it just sort of come naturally somehow. I mean, I didn't really study poetry or anything, and I'm not so hot at punctuation, grammar, and all that. And I just love working with, I love the other art forms. I'm inspired by all different things. Like I went to film school in Prague. That was super inspiring. So I love, and I lived in New York. I moved there when I was 20. I was super shy. So, I just sort of fall into things that tend to be super creative, inspiring in other art forms. Like I was an apprentice at the Actors Studio in the Village Voice. I think all these things sort of happened before I started around this time. I mean, when I lived in New York, I started writing poetry. When I was at the Actors Studio, they gave me like a prop typewriter there. And I started writing the poems that I first wrote over there. So I saw a mannequin and that made me somehow write a poem. So things can just trigger a poem. And so, I don't know, I think just kind of being involved in the other arts or being inspired and open to different things, I think helps a lot. And it just, I just, yeah, and yeah.
So what other arts are you engaged in, and how do they speak to poetry?
Well, I mean, definitely all the music projects, the band, as well as Ellyn Robbie project, because they're like, when I did the Rodeo for the Sheepish album, the project is I recorded all the poems at the Hen House Studios, and then music was put to it, and I was hearing how they were doing the process. Now with the Ellyn Robbie project, in many cases, like what we would do is sometimes he would be writing music and simultaneously I would write the poem, like at the very same time, and then we wouldn't really, then afterwards we would go through and read it, and somehow they just happened to work out. Myth was a poem existent. Sometimes there's a poem existent that one time he just improvised that music for. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. I mean, couldn't be better. So that I feel lucky when I find some amazing collaborators that way. And I've done some stuff with paintings, like ekphrastic poetry, and writing poems, like different poems. And then I just found out that my poem Ocean Song was going to be illustrated to a book. So that's just immersion. And of course, all the film, I wrote this when I had gotten the Gilman Scholarship to study abroad. And my project was, I wrote a book of poetry called Prahan the Poet. And so many of the poems, mainly like Rodeo for the Sheep was comprised of all these poems written during that period in Prague. It was super, super inspiring. Wait, you know what? Oh, wait. I don't know if I can find it, but that was just a super creative time. And I mean, and just going, I just feel I can't even imagine not being so involved in just appreciation for the other art forms. I mean, that has been, I just can't even, I mean, it's so a part of things since, I mean, musical theater is a favorite of mine. I love it. And I mean, I just can't even imagine how that I'm thrilled with other art forms so much. There's so much. I love Stephen Sondheim. Oh my God, and Leonard Cohen and Dylan. I mean, the imagery of I just love it. I'm super enthused about all this. Yeah.
So all of it, all of the arts, I think, with so many of us as poets, I'm sure. What would you say has been one of the biggest rewards for you in expressing yourself creatively?
Because I grew up really shy. Like, I mean, I didn't really order in restaurants. I would like say, oh, can you please? I mean, I was like shy, like to an extreme. And so everything's kind of just surprising that it turned out that I would end up being, I mean, I ended up, I didn't say that, I ended up reading at a reading, somebody said there's a casting director, they want to put you in a movie, so I ended up in SAG. I mean, I fall into things. And so just when a person puts himself out there, even if they're super shy, you don't know what's going to happen. But I think what's been really rewarding is I think people have been resonating with the work, and I'm touched by that. I've gotten that feeling all these years that there's a resonance and the warmth of the community. I appreciate that. It's very touching and stuff. I'm grateful for it.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else have some comments or questions? Please unmute if you need to. I'm seeing in the chat, Lynn comments, I really like the RBG.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
All right, well, let's switch to our next reader then.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Ellyn. So our next reader is Rick Lupert, who has been involved with poetry since 1990. He's been nominated for Best of the Net and Pushcart prizes. He created poetrysuperhighway.com, and I'll put that link in chat in a moment, and hosts a weekly virtual Cobalt Cafe series. And I'm in awe of that you're able to do this weekly. I managed to do Soul Food once a month, and Cobalt is every week, so bravo to you. He has 25 collections of poetry, including God Wrestler and the Tokyo Van Nuys Express, and he edited the anthology A Poet's Cider. Is that how you say it?
It's a Sidor, actually. But
Sidor. Yes, and A Poet's Haggadah. Is that right?
That's perfect.
Okay. The Night Goes On All Night and Ekphrastia Gone Wild. There should be a video series, Poets Gone Wild. He works as a music teacher and graphic designer in Newhall, California, but you just moved?
Yeah, I lived in Van Nuys for a number of years in the San Fernando Valley, and about a year ago, my wife and son and I moved about 15-20 minutes north to the Santa Clarita Valley, to the city of Newhall.
Well, I hope you're enjoying it there. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Rick Lupert.
Michael, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be asked to read somewhere, to be somewhere. I would first like to say that I think that at this point, Ellyn, you could change your name to Ellyn definitely. That's just my suggestion. I'm really thrilled that I got to hear you read again. And Michael, it's such a cool thing that you ask one featured reader to pick another featured reader. I'd never been asked that before, I've put together readings before, but it's a really interesting thing to ask and to do and to put thought into. And I was delighted for the opportunity to do that and to hear Ellyn read as well. In terms of Poets Gone Wild, that to me, that's every open reading ever. It seems like it's already happening. But we'll see. Some are more tame than others. So thank you for having me. I'm going to get right into my set. This first poem is called Phantom Doorbell. At the live end of a long sleep, in the moment before my soul returns to my body, after a night of doing whatever it is that souls do in their hours off, I dream the doorbell rings, which wakes me up for real, with a boner as big as, well, I'm doing the best I can. I don't hear any other movement in the house, so I put on pants, or is it I put pants on? I'm still grappling with the nuances of language, and a shirt, and head to the front door. No one's there, not even a contact-free delivery, only an unseasonably cold spring wind flying up my pants leg, and the realization I can't even trust my dreams anymore. This next one, I cherish my pet cats, and if you're a cat person or a pet person, and you've been so for life, I'm sure you understand. But we if you've been one for a long time, invariably one of them goes away. One that you've had for a long time. And this particular poem, I have 3 cats now, and this poem is about 3 cats that I used to have that went away. It's called Animal Hospitality. I can tell which cat is walking through my house by the sounds its paws make as they come into contact with the wood floors. At 1 a.m, when I finally arrive at my bed, Cleo walks in. She is the oldest cat, not in the world, just in the house. You can barely hear her since we took her claws 9 years ago. She propels herself to the bed like a kite. No sound, no bounce. She makes herself comfortable. At 5 a.m, she will purr. I'd tell you the name of my next cat is Tigger, but then you would judge me. He walks in like a pony wearing tap shoes. If I make even the slightest audible sound or motion, he will rush to the bed and lick any visible skin of mine he can find. I am okay with this. Our third cat is larger than a moose. He'd come to the bed, but he can't find room. His breathing is louder than the president's helicopter. He will cry for his breakfast with the imperative of Vietnam. You're running a zoo, my friend once said, to which I replied, let me show you the Chinese water dragon and the frog. Did I tell you I tried to keep a bird alive that I'd found outside? It didn't make it. Did I tell you about the caterpillar I killed? I wrote this poem a couple of years ago, and it keeps being relevant, unfortunately. This is called Poems into Guns. I'd like to load poems into all of the guns instead of the death they usually put in there. Let the words clog up the inner workings. Let a stanza wrap itself around the trigger. Let a dozen traditional haiku take residence in the barrel. I'd like to load poems into all the guns and then still never fire them. Let them linger in there until the metal rusts it all away and all that's left is living people and words. Well, we're now entering the Jewish poems phase of the reading. I've got a couple of Jewish poems for you. I don't know if you were prepared for that. There's probably a blessing that should be said. I was at a bar mitzvah recently, a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that happens in the middle of the bar mitzvah ceremony, after the bar bat mitzvah kid does everything that they're supposed to do, the culmination of all their work, is candy that's been passed around into the congregation gets thrown at them. And it had been a while since I'd experienced this, and it felt dangerous to me. And so this is a poem about that. There's a Hebrew song mixed in the middle of it, which basically just means congratulations and joy to you. This is called Throwing Candy. The war tribunal gathers in the corner of the room, hands clenched with candy. The bar mitzvah boy is going down. The moment comes and the bombardment begins. Siman tov o mazel tov. No one is prepared for the candyage except for the bar mitzvah boy who starts to fire back, candy caught and hurled at the revelers. U mazel tov, u siman tov. Thank God they purchased the soft gels. No one wants to talk about the hard candy massacre at the Fitzstein bar mitzvah. Yehelanu, Yehelanu. Both sides have been preparing for this their whole lives, which, relatively speaking, has not been that long. Everyone claims victory since no one has put an eye out and no pockets go empty. Ulechol Yisrael. Though little cousin Shlomo wasn't able to help out with the Aleinu as he had previously agreed to at the end of the service, as his teeth and tongue were stuck together with fruit gem residue. Yehelanu, Yehelanu. The rabbi took over in a pinch. This is the way of the coming of age. This is how little Jews become adults. Ulechol Yisrael. I don't know whose mic is on, but I'm enjoying it. Every week, I've done this for a number of years, I write a poem for the Torah portion, the bit of Torah that we're supposed to read that week. I've been doing this for, 6-7 years now. All of them are archived on a new website I put up called jewishpoetry.net. I post a new one every week. The very first set of these poems, written, I don't know, a certain number of years ago, was collected in this book called God Wrestler, a poem for every Torah portion, which you can check out at jewishpoetry.net or on Amazon if you're so interested. I'm going to read the poem for this week's Torah portion. And the reason for that is because that's what I'm supposed to do. The tradition, and I should mention also that my impetus from this comes not so much from the point of view of a believer, but someone who's really connected to the tradition of doing this, which has been passed down. So it's a whole thing to be kind of a real secular-minded person, and to look at all of these things that talk about supernatural, mandates, etc. But even if this particular poem isn't the funniest one or the best written one, it's the one I have to read because that's what this week's Torah portion is. Beha alotecha. We are in the middle of the wilderness at the beginning of our 40 years of wandering, and we are learning what it is that we can do based on what's being told to us by Moses. So here you go. We've been in the shadow of this mountain for almost a year, and now, with specific instructions, our history is never detailed without specific instructions. We walk away towards a place we once did not know and now is a vague memory. A place that, if you were to look at it on a map, should only take a day or so to get to. But this is the one task that doesn't come with specific instructions. And so a generation of people disappear into the desert as we make our way with manna raining out of the sky, because who doesn't love a free meal? And apparently the answer is us, because the journey is arduous. It's so much easier to sit at the base of a mountain than to follow a cloud into the wilderness, and we won't take a step further without meat. So Moses appeals to God, and God promises meat will soon come out of our noses, which sounds like a lot of meat, but despite my vegetarianism, I don't even want to eat a cucumber that came out of someone's nose. But at least we know the suggestion box is working, and on the way, after quail meat flies out of the sea for us to gather and eat, but not gluttonously, because that leads to death by plague, Moses decides to become celibate, which honestly is 6 or 7 other poems worth of discussion, but suffice it to say, his sister Miriam isn't pleased and complains, because that's what we do in every situation, complain, and though the punishment seems a strange match for the crime, she gets leprosy. So I guess watch your tongues of dissatisfaction and enjoy whatever rains out of the sky for you to eat, as most people don't have the benefit of anything they need raining out of the sky, even rain. Am I right, Californians? And let's cry for help for anyone with any affliction, like Moses did for his sister. The fewest words are all we need. Please, God, heal her or him or them. Make us whole as we march to the sound of your trumpets towards a land we'd like to know again. This completes the Jewish poetry section of the reading. I'm having a special on additional Jewish poetry. I ruined that. I was going to make a joke about circumcision and then say half off, but I blew the intro, so forget it. It's not happening. Here's a poem I wrote called 17 Syllables for the Supreme Court. Very recent piece. I called it 17 syllables instead of haiku because I run a website called Haikuniverse, haikuniverse.com. It publishes a haiku from submissions every single day. And I've learned through this process that if you use the word haiku and you don't follow the traditional format for it and spirit of it, it rubs people the wrong way. So I've taken to calling 17-syllable poems 17-syllable poems, 17 syllables for the Supreme Court. And who else is frustrated that my introduction for the poem is going to be like 10 times longer than the actual poem was? Anybody? A few of you? Okay. It is hard living in the best and worst country all at the same time. There you go. And now to the travel poetry section of the evening. I write a travel poetry book almost every year. The one I wrote last year when my wife and I and son got to go to Hawaii for the first time is forthcoming later this year. It's a book that will be called, it's going to be called I Am Not Writing a Book of Poems in Hawaii. That is the title of the book. And here's a little sneak preview of it. This was written towards the end of the trip when I was getting nostalgic about the fact that the experience was ending. That's the curse of us poets. We're always kind of assessing the experience rather than having it. So when the end of something is coming along, you can really feel it. We were at a resort, and at this particular resort, Hawaiian chants, blessings were played at different points of the day on the speakers throughout the property, indicating different times of day. This poem is called It Is Now Everywhere. I'd like to look at the ocean one last time before we go, but I'm afraid it will make me weep. You may say it is the same ocean I have in my backyard, but the ocean is always bluer on the other side. The Ohana woman chants again at 11:30, heralding the middle of the day. She will do this again tonight at 11 and tomorrow morning at 7, and so on every day forever, wherever I am on earth, even after I have become dust. And my most recent book is a collection of poems I wrote in Japan the summer before the pandemic. It's called the Tokyo Van Nuys Express. It's available online, wherever you buy books online. This was written at the beginning of our last full day in Japan. We were based in the city of Kyoto, and we took a day trip to the city of Hiroshima. This was written in the morning before we left for that adventure. This is called, make sure I'm reading the right one. Yes, this is called Poem. Actually, was written, it was an interesting, well, I'm just going to read it. Today, the racist who runs my country told people, elected officials, to go back to where they come from. Today, I go to Hiroshima to apologize for yet another thing. Father's Day is coming up this Sunday. To celebrate Father's Day this year, my wife and son are leaving me at home alone and visiting her parents on the East Coast. I couldn't go on this trip. They promised me a pleasant Zoom on Sunday, so we'll see. This poem is called How I Met My Fathers. It's in 2 parts. My father tells me our ancestors were not Jewish, but Italian. This explains the pasta in 2005. This explains why I'm the only Lupert boy in Florida who has ever ritually covered his head. This explains nothing about why my grandparents were named Miriam and Reuben. I never shook either of their hands. The story of that family, a forever mystery. If I ever find out who I am, you'll be the first one I tell. When I became a father, I stuck the name Reuben in the middle of my son's name. My recently reacquired father was so proud of the respect shown his dad by that move. But my mother's father gets the rest of the credit. That Reuben had a beard like Moses, forged in Bialystok, Poland, fed Hebrew to the children of central New York. That Reuben kept us all in yarmulkes, the Reubens that were, their heads covered because they knew nothing else, the Reubens that are, ready to cover our heads whenever Friday makes an appearance, the Reubens that will be, their yarmulkes already being knitted for their inevitable arrival. All right, I have two more for you. This one is for my son Jude. I wrote it when he was much younger than he is now. He's 13. This is called Adventure in Language. Lately, Jude has been referring to a glass of water as, are you ready? An ass of Wawa. I don't think you were ready. Michael, thank you again for asking me to be here tonight. It's a huge honor to be asked to read, to be thought enough to do this. It's a cool format. I love being able to travel all over the world to participate in readings, and it's great to be back in the Seattle area for this. I really appreciate it, and thank you all for being here. And Ellyn, you were fantastic. Thanks for agreeing to doing this with me. I'm going to read one last poem from my book, The Tokyo Van Nuys Express. This was written after we got home from Japan. One of the reasons we're able to go on these trips sometimes is because summer camp exists. So our kid was still at summer camp, and we were at home after a long trip in Japan. This is called Quiet. It is never this quiet in our house. Addie is buying groceries, and Jude, for all I know, is on a horse. I know for sure I've got a few more days without aggravated remote control clicking, without yelling at people over a headset. In Japan, children are not allowed to make noise until they are 35. I made that up, but this is creative writing, and I'm feeling creative. We had homemade Japanese dinner tonight. Homemade with Addie's hands and the things she found at the stores, and our recent memories of small portions served one at a time so no items felt crowded by any others, and, as one menu said, portions were perfectly sized. It's all over on Sunday. We drive back to the Simi Valley to pick up our favorite noise. We've got a hose ready, a pair of scissors. We expect we'll need a second car for his fingernails. I'll miss the quiet, but I know it'll be just a handful of fast-moving years before the quiet doesn't go away. It goes so fast, they say. It is going so fast. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rick. May I ask your path to poetry?
I want to say it was a dirt path between two trees and a big rock, but that might be an obnoxious answer, so I won't say that. I think I came to poetry because I needed something to do with all the ridiculous things that I was thinking. I'm a very observational poet. I think sometimes, I see funny signs that are worded strangely, and I get transported to a whole other world of meaning, and I'd think of those things, and then I'd forget them. And I thought, I should buy a little journal and write these things down. And so I did that in the late 80s, I think, and they started to get a little longer. And I wondered, what it was that I was doing. And then I saw in the local LA alternative paper, the LA Weekly, there was an event called the Poetry Circle at a venue that I know Ellyn knows really well, and also other people who are here with us tonight. Lynn Bronstein, I know, knows it, the Iguana Cafe, which was a real nexus of artists of all kind. that sadly doesn't exist anymore. And I'd never been there, and it said, poetry circle, come share a poem and get feedback. It wasn't an open reading. It wasn't exactly a workshop. It was come read your poem and the other people will give you feedback. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to bring my ridiculous little book of thoughts and read something from it, and they will then tell me it is not poetry, and then I will know, and I can move on and do something else with my life. And when I got there, I found an incredibly supportive, creative, and talented group of people who, gosh darn it, liked what I said at that event, and it was incredibly encouraging. And so I figured I should self-identify as a poet at that point, and that was my path to begin in poetry.
And people, I mean, individual people must help you along the way too. I know that's true for me, that it's a community thing. It's nice to be part of that. You also recognize, there's some poets you like more than others, whether in person or things that you read and so on. Would you say there are other particular poets that have influenced you over the years?
Definitely. I mean, this is a similar question to who are your favorite poets, I suppose. I think Richard Brautigan was one of the very first poets I read, and he was doing things in poetry which were so different than what most of us, the bulk of what most of us learned in school in terms of the classics that are all wonderful. But he was doing poetry I didn't need to do work to understand. He was doing poetry that took turns that I didn't expect. He was making all kinds of observations. He was writing incredibly short poems, and man with his hat on, he's about 5 inches taller than a taxi cab. That's one of his poems, and it's like, wow, that can be a poem. That's really interesting to me. So there's probably no one who influenced me more than Brautigan in terms of being a lover of poetry and my own writing. Some influences come from British humor. I was a big Monty Python fan, so I'm always, trying to be funny as well as clever and interesting. And then, many of the poets writing today who I'm lucky enough to call colleagues, people who aren't, say, the most famous or biggest names, are people who I really adore. One of my favorite people and poets is Brendan Constantine, who's another LA poet, who has a similar, he's just a whole education of poetry, and he's always doing things that are astounding and surprising and reminding you that this is an art form, and as an artist you can do things the way that you want to do them.
So I also had a question about Haikuniverse. Featured poet today is Brendan McGreen, and earlier today he forwarded the announcement email showing his poem to a bunch of people. And I think that's one of the things you may not hear when you're a proprietor of such a thing. But he shared this with great pride with a bunch of us. And it's a treat to be represented on something like that, or any poetry journal offline or online. And I'm curious, how much feedback do you get from people, and what's the nature of that feedback, aside from people getting bent out of shape about whether it's haiku or not?
Well, that's interesting. I think sort of the nature of the empowerment one feels behind their own computer in a room by themselves leads to an equal amount of communiques expressing unhappiness, to anything that you might have done, as well as kudos. You're right. It's cool to hear that the poet from today shared that, because I don't get a lot of that unless I'm tagged in it, and someone says thank you Rick Lupert or thank you Haikuniverse publishing me, or thank you Poetry Superhighway. So, I most of the feedback I get is, looking at responses to the posts itself, and Haikuniverse as an emailed publication, which is where most people see it, I think. Not a lot of people, the Facebook page doesn't get a lot of traction, and maybe a lot of people see it on the website. But, so since it's going out to people's emails, I don't know what they're doing with it, whereas if I post Poets of the Week for Poetry Superhighway, that group has a lot of people in it that are very active, and I might get a lot of reactions to the poems or the poets. Most of the thanks that comes in are not from third parties, though. It's from the people who are published, who are just say, thank you so much for including my work in your publication,
With tiny words?
What's that?
Are you familiar with tiny words?
Oh, yes. I get the Tiny Words email every day as well. Yeah, it was one of the inspirations for Haikuniverse.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about it is the discussion that goes on the website, because there are people commenting on the poems, and sometimes chains of reaction poems involve occasionally. But that's, if you just get it in your inbox and read it and stop there, you're missing half the joy of it, I think.
I didn't even know there was a communal aspect to that, so I will check it out. But that's one of the cool things that I'm learning about haiku. One of the things I've learned from Cathabella Wilson, who is here, and other great writers of haiku and haibun and other forms similar to that. Like, I just learned about, I forget what it's called, maybe Cathabella, the split haiku sequence, I think, where you'll take a haiku and that's been written, and then you'll split the lines into three. Well, it's already split, and you write another haiku in response to each line. So then now you have 3 lines and 3 additional haiku, and it's amazing to me that form.
The fun creation, Cathabella. Do you want to talk about it? Or say anything about it?
No, I'll just listen tonight, okay? With all
right.
that's going on here.
Yeah, it's fun to see people.
Thank you, Rick Lupert. I'm so happy I managed to peek in on you, because I'm so happy you're here. And thank you, Michael, for inviting Rick and all the good things he does for everyone.
I think you must be keep very busy with all of your websites and all that writing and book publishing you do, Rick.
Yes, I do.
Do the day job too?
I do. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, so that on some days it keeps me very, very busy, and other days it gives me flexibility to do the other stuff that I do. I kind of have it down to everything's kind of compartmentalized into days, so I'm not like working on it 24/7. Like Monday is the day I'll do that weekend's Poetry Superhighway newsletter and update, and Thursday is the day that I'll pick the next weeks of Haikuniverse, and Wednesday is when I make the broadside for the Cobalt Poets. So it's just one thing a day on those days, so it's not kind of maddening to think I'm 24/7 doing these things.
Well, how do you manage when you have to go on vacation? Plan ahead, I guess.
Well, I mean, when I go on vacation, I'll do 2 or 3 weeks worth of that stuff in advance, and thanks to the internet and WordPress and Facebook, you can schedule things to all happen automatically. So all I have to do is just check my email to make sure it worked. So it's magic what you can do these days in advance.
Yay, technology. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Hi, Rick. Oh, I like how you make everything funny, even serious stuff you make funny. You cannot help it.
It is a curse.
It's a nice curse.
Someone said, when I was writing the first set of Torah poems and posting them on Facebook, you know, I can't help when I think of something funny to include it, even if it's kind of breaks the poem, you know, a little bit. And someone actually posted as a response to that, you know, I wish you wouldn't include every funny thing that you thought of in the middle of your poem, you know. So, you know, creative uses of parentheses to help people skip over it if they needed to. I don't know. But thank you, Martina. I'm delighted that you're on a wavelength to appreciate that.
So maybe if you post such poems online, you could hyperlink the jokey asides.
It's a great idea.
Little pop-ups. Make
I'll
the
do
poem
that.
interactive that way. Anyone else?
I just loved hearing you and the great variety of poems that you have, and really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you again, Rick and Ellyn. Grateful for your sharing your work and your thoughts tonight. And thank you everyone for being here. Just a quick show of hands if you're interested in reading for the open mic. Seeing 4, count myself to 5, at least 5 hands. So in no particular order. Bruce, why don't you start us off? You ready?
Yes.
Go for about 3 or 4 minutes each.
Okay. Where to go? Oh, well, I'll just read it. Frothing naughty wake. He split the stile, that thing you jump over that divides territory in the fairy tales. The stile, it is whither, for that matter, whither your timber, weather your timbers, weather your knots, tether your thoughts, then ride them loose and high in the saddle around the ring. They were doing 20 knots, and the wake sizzled, spreading phosphorescent in the moonlight. That frothing, naughty wake. Are you naughty? You know, like the lumber where all the branches were once visible, all the sprouts, the growth wings. Did the plane course over you? Did the blade leave you flattened and attractive and useful?
I don't even know where I am, but I think I should get on.
Pardon? I like to be useful, don't you? Naughty can be lumpy sometimes. I pine for the naughty, for old branches, for the signs of growth, for the acorns they drop in the mud. Are you naughty, natty, chatty, witty? There's that pair of T's there in the middle of the word. You like my T's. Let's do mass, celebrate mass. I love your gravity. Let's precess, go out to precess together. I love the tilt of your axis. Let's do that angle dance, orbit and wobble and shine, then reflect. Then let's run the table and tabulate. Do you tabulate? And
Thank you, Bruce.
And one more, if that's...
Go for it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Holden's ball field. Holden drops the thick old catcher's mitt and the shoes in the back and sits sullenly in the passenger seat. What's the word? Practice, practice my ass, Dad. Got the catcher racket tasks licked. Who do you think you are? A clunker to nowhere. Batter don't matter to me. Shit, son, you got no rhythm. Gonna be a goddamn novelist, I suppose. We got an oral tradition to keep up, and you be dropping the Demeter. Dad puts the pedal to the metal in the old Odyssey, and we head out to the field. Jason, the ump, looks out at the field, but don't need no coin toss. All he ever sees is heads ever since the incident. Sharp plump strumpet on the purple taffeta, tuffet trays the wilting spinach, weighs the quips the sailors wail, grasps the curds and whey, strikes out for the confession stand. Proudly turning now, she nods and leans, lights up the glaring crowd. Play ball.
Thank you, Bruce. Let's see, to read next, how about Julian?
Hi,
And you're dialing in from where? Remind us again.
from Malaysia.
Malaysia. Thank you for joining us.
Let me just turn speakers on. This is called Do the Math. The first box I played in was probably cardboard, something that contained milk tins from the neighborhood sundry shop. My mom would empty it and let me sit in it. In my imagination, it was a boat floating down the Ganges or the Amazon. I might have been light enough for my brothers to have lifted me in it, circling the round table in the hall like a Wright brother on a maiden flight, whooping with hands outstretched. My sister may have tied a string and dragged me around in it like a train, choo-chooing as we rode along around Mom's kitchen or dangerously down the staircase. We may have fallen, cried, laughed it off. No one would have died. When they suit me up and lay me in that last box, I won't get to choose its make or let my imagination run. The pallbearers will disperse the weight by 6, but the new likeness will be heavy for some. Do the math. In a marriage, 1 + 1 never adds to 2, and 1 multiplied by 1 is never 1. Human value multiplies with age. When you divide, you make things smaller. When you add, you overthink it. When you subtract, you negate me. We were never meant to tick each other off within boxes. We color our lives outside of them. We are equal only when our imagination soars on the shoulders of others before us and after us. Both sides are never a balanced equation. When falling and rising is a rite of passage. Do the math. 6 feet under, 12 feet above. The dirt between us is soil for the planting or a box of it to cart away and claim your own. The grave robbers dream of treasures beneath, the cemetery dogs hope for pickings above. We only light the candles or place the flowers until the grave has been weeded and cleaned. Human folly is calculating the losses on either side. The sky smiles knowing clouds come and go by catching drips. And blue is only one of its many colors. You are limited only by the box you pine for, child. All else is imagination. Do the math. End poem, thank you.
Thank you. And what time is it there? It's 8:15 p.m. here.
It's 11:16 a.m. on Friday, so I'm coming to you from the future.
Okay, well, we're in your
And
past.
it looks good. The future looks good. It's better than yesterday.
We could do that. Thank you. Before our next reader, I'd like to take a group photo. If you'd like to look like you're waving, you'd like to participate. Okay, here we go. Just a minute. Hold on just a second here. Okay, on the count of 3. All right, let me check that I've got that. I can save that properly. Okay, all done. Thank you. All right, who else would like to read? Lynn, why don't you read next?
Thank you. Well, I have a couple of poems based on things that happened in the news this year. One of them very recent, which is pretty much of a downer. And then the one after that is still kind of sad, but at least a little bit more reassuring. So the first one, and I hasten to add, this is not me speaking. This is a persona poem. This is Lament of the Shooter. I have to defend myself from the children with their hunger for knowledge and their nonstop questions that I have no time to answer. I have to defend myself from the women who are big and strong and who can read my mind. I have to defend myself from the men who love men and the women who love women and the men who turn into women and the women who turn into men and the ones who aren't anything and the ones who are both, for they're all coming to get me, and their hands and their tongues will gouge me and lick me clean. I have to defend myself from the many colors I see around me because I can only bear to see white. I have to defend myself from the Jews and the Muslims because their God has it in for me. I have to defend myself from the strangers and the odd ones, the atheists, the communists, the blind, the deaf, the lame, and the ones who have lived so long that they know more than I do. I have to defend myself from the outer space aliens who may soon be arriving to wreck this planet and prove that heaven is just a bunch of other planets. I have to defend myself. All I have are these weapons, these beautiful tubes of metal that carry little seeds of death. I hurt inside unless I can defend myself. There are so many who are killing me, and I am only one who must not die. And okay, the second one of my favorite singers left us in January, but this is the true story of the time I got to meet her. It's called Ronnie Spector Hugged Me. This is what it looked like to an insecure teen. 3 girls with enormous hair and amazingly made up eyes, wearing sequin dresses and spiky heels, looking up at me from the sleeve of a 45. The label said her name was Veronica, but we called her Ronnie. I wanted to be like her, with hair piled high and that little tremble in her voice and that aura of a gang deb that I secretly wished I could have. I didn't know about her life beyond the vinyl, the stress, the abuse, living both sides of the color line, the bottle of Manischewitz that she hid in a toilet tank, the man she loved keeping her a prisoner and blurring her reality, so that for years, the rest of us could sing her songs in a karaoke bar, but she could not. When we finally met, I knew I just had to tell her. I had read her book, learned about her struggle. What could I say to the sequin siren who danced in her spiked heels, but fled her hipster tyrant husband and her bare feet? I think I said that I related, that I felt for her. I wanted her to know that she was special, that she had survived so much more than I could ever understand. And she just hugged me. I found myself enveloped in her famous long black hair in a moment many men would have traded gold for. What passed between us in each other's arms had a value that could never be sold as a souvenir. Our lives, so dissimilar, briefly touched. The night we met, we knew we needed each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I know Brian wants to read. Anyone else also want to
Martina?
read? Martina, please read. Jennifer after that.
Me first?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first one is called Moments. The misty mornings and soothing breeze that each morning greet me and bring me peace are moments I hold tightly in my heart. The colorful flowers and sweet songbirds, the snow-covered mountains looking at me, I carry home and turn into dreams. The gopher mounds and yellow finches, and surprisingly enough, the hummingbirds that make wishes with puffy flowers. The shining star and baby blue sky that shower me with love on my daily walk. are my source of energy and can make me grin. The weeping willows and mourning doves remind me of losses, but also of hope. And the many flowers that surround my view know the joy they bring to my eyes and nose. Even crows and stray cats and dogs, their cawing, meowing, and barking noise remind my ears that I'm still alive. Wriggling earthworms and roly-polies that kiss the soil and give it life deserve the love of a gentle touch. Those annoying weeds that crowd the garden, once removed, loosen the soil and make it breathe, thus perpetuating the cycle of life. A pebble on the pavement is not an obstacle, but an opportunity to make something new, to be creative and create new life. Such are precious moments that make life worthy of living deeply. Blessed be such precious moments. Thank you. And these are just three short, different genre. Haiku. Mother Earth once cried when man's greed burned her forest and creatures perished. And then a tanka. Forests are burning and water in blue oceans cannot stop the flames. Man puts his life on the line to save the one home he knows. And one of the genres that I first learned in high school, cinquain, tears, clear, salty, soothing, cleansing, purifying, do away with pain, water. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned roly-polies in the first poem, and I remember some discussion
Oh, yeah.
that must have been on Facebook that some people would call them something very different. I wonder if it's a regional term.
They're actually a type of crustaceans.
Yeah.
Some people call them pill bugs.
Yeah.
I put it in a poem and people told me I should switch from roly-poly to pill bug.
Yeah,
I think it's a regional thing. I wonder.
In the South, we call them roly-poly.
Yeah. I like multiple terms for the things. That's fun. Thank you again. Jennifer, would you like to read next, please?
Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not really Jennifer. I'm Lalo Kiki Riki, but I have been outed so much in the last 2 years, I decided I wouldn't pay attention. Nevertheless, this is a poem called Comfort and Joy, and I hope the light stays long enough for this. I sleep in a desert of dreams, in a place where odd things happen. Under the rocky Petterdau, wakened by dusk's neon sky, in a high cupboard abandoned for years, forgotten perhaps, someone has left a bottle of that sweet old Southern comfort. Everyone thinks Janis Joplin. We do, if we had heard her story. From a dead man's souvenir glass, I drink 3 shots in a row. Pausing after each for a breath. Alice would know. Wait for it. 3 kisses and honey warming my heart and on to the blood, through the back door to the cosmos. Janis would know. Look up. Under the Milky Way tonight. Oh, yes. Poems drop like stars. And that's called Comfort and Joy. And I have one more, if that's okay with you. Oh, thank you, Lynn. And it's called Dead Man's Accordion, the same dead man who left the shot glass, by the way. In a cabin north of Joshua Tree National Park, an old woman listens to Roadrunner radio, straps on a dead man's accordion to play along with Alan Price, House of the Rising Sun. It's A minor, D minor, E minor, In other words, C. But the old instrument can't play minor chords, only the majors, and it stops at A, balking at sorrow. Built to play along with only happy tunes. She sets the instrument back into its case. The memory of his long fingers she has put away like fallen leaves, dried between sheets of tissue. The animals finish the song. And the organ solo ends on a minor chord. Is it D minor, saddest of chords? Perhaps. Sin, misery, regret, blown onto a desert wind. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian has said he'd like to read last. Is there anyone else who'd still like to read? Well, I have a couple of poems I could share. We both have poets clutching flowers. Let's begin with that. First one is called Quietude. And that term, I'm talking about it in response to Ron Silliman. If any of you know Silliman's blog, he calls it, which is a place where he comments on poetry of all kinds. So he's sort of a non-academic critic of poetry in the modern world. And he kind of complains about what he calls the school of quietude in poetry. So this is my reaction to him. The school of quietude would have poets clutching tulips with trippy rapture. Angsty teens would shred those flowers or wouldn't even notice them. MFA graduates and their professors might dissect them to within a millimeter, any fragrance or beauty. Who knows what slammers would do? But quietude is an arrow in the quiver. One would use a hammer when you have a nail, a trowel when you have zinnia seedlings, a shovel when you have a body to bury. At times, quietude may be where the poem begins, recollected in tranquility and all that, not always a destination where the poem ends. Here's to all the tulips, stems, leaves, and bulbs, and to the mulch they make after. And here's another one, also beginning with a poet clutching a flower. And in this poem, I'm exploring all the cliches of poetry, and I sort of take an attitude to them that isn't necessarily what I think, but it's what the poem, it's the stance of the poem. But you tell me afterwards, seriously, I'd be curious to know what you think. Is it insulting, or is it funny, or somewhere in between? You tell me. This is called Loser. The image of the poet clutching a flower gags me. So too the cliche of the black beret. Apologies to those with black berets. Second thought, no. Get yourself your own hat, like Ellyn or Brian here. And your own words while you're at it. Have something to say that isn't drenched in identity, politics, or teen angst, even if you're not a teen. And enough with the witty wordplay that's been done to the gallows, the self-involved metaphors and private meanings. Enough of the gratuitous F-bombs, the in-your-face and aren't I tender musings. Dump the paranoid political rants, the sexual bluntness, the introspective navel-gazing, the trite social commentary you think no one else has ever thought of before. Enough of all the anxious woe is me drama, thinking you're constantly misunderstood and underappreciated, not to mention underpaid. You're not always broke or troubled, and you don't have to carry a notebook wherever you go or write about your dog. You don't even have to vote Democrat, have an MFA, listen to NPR, or be a pacifist. Yes, you can have a day job and still be proud of it, even if you're teaching remedial English. Nor do you have to subsist on coffee, wine, or quaaludes, claim to know the meanings of dreams, or endlessly drop allusions to poems no one else has ever read. Have a shower, too, now and then, while you're dismantling your ivory tower or that castle in the ether. And stop assuming you're losing every battle with God. There you go. I don't know. Have I insulted anyone? That was not meant to be a rhetorical question. I'd be curious to know.
I thought the have a shower with the ivory tower. I love that. That was a fun poem.
It's a pre-pandemic poem, but I myself have had showers a little less often during the pandemic. Okay, I think we've come to the end of our evening. I'll remind you that our next Soul Food Poetry Night reading is coming up on July 21 with a different Zoom link, and that'll be available on the Soul Food Poetry Night website. And features that night are Kristen Lindquist and Leslie Dower. And you're welcome to come back again next month.
Do I get to read?
Yes, sorry, Brian. Pardon me, I'm forgetting. Yes. All right, take us home, Brian.
Okay. Let me pull them up real quick. I just had them 2 seconds ago. The first is brand new, so this is the first time I'm ever reading it. It's called All My Unused Lines Are Tattoos No One Knows About. Sometimes I write a poem with an allegedly perfect line, the type of line that never loses its shine, the type of line that continues speaking after its turn is over, the type of line the other lines decide to vote off the island, the type of line the poet is so infatuated with he tattoos it onto his psyche after he removes it from the poem. His psyche consists of inner nooks and crannies and geographical ridges that form the outer surface of the great gray cauliflower inside his skull. His cerebrum, cerebellum, and hippocampus are campuses that have been endlessly needled and inked with wordplay and grandiose, misguided profundities. When I write a line that goes solo, it gets placed in an unused line file inside my mind that forms an exquisite corpse poem that's so exquisite if I tell anyone about it, my psyche won't pay the tattoo parlor bill anymore. And then this is called How to Get Away with Nudity. How to Get Away with Public Nudity. When I read my poetry, I empty myself of me. I'm not pretending to be someone else. I'm not exactly stepping out of myself. Maybe I'm stripping bare without removing any clothing. Maybe the clothes I choose to wear are a costume I use to hide in plain sight. Maybe the words I commit to page and extol through voice are my version of streaking across the 50-yard line while Lady Gaga sings the Star-Spangled Banner at the Super Bowl. When I empty myself of me when I read my poetry, it's like tossing a deck of cards in the air and hoping the jokers land face up. Every day I wake up as a wild card that tries to learn its way out of being wild. When I empty myself of me when I read my poetry, every time I play 52 pickup, I pick up the cards, put them back in the box, return to living life, and because I am a poet, I get to empty myself of me every time I write a new poem, if I choose. Thank you.
Thank you. I've had this theory that poetry is an act of vulnerability, and that's exactly what you're talking about. I mean, in some cases, it just says, hey, this matters to me, and it sort of says, does this matter to you? And I think if we react to every poem by receiving it as an act of vulnerability, I think that could make us much more open. And I think recognizing that as writers is part of our journey. And obviously you've captured that with that poem. So a very suitable one for us to end on. So thank you. Any parting words from anyone?
Thanks again for having me and being here.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank
Special.
you. I'm glad I got some soul food in, being from
Yes.
originally being from the South. So I've been meaning to try this open mic out for a while.
Well, thank you. Glad you could all be here. And a special thank you to Ellyn and Rick for our featured readers tonight. Again, thank you all for being here. If you are able to come back again, you'd be most welcome for the open mic or just to listen. And again, very glad you came tonight. And see you again another time.